Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the book Annotating Tag. This was designed by Jessie over at Bowties and Books. They actually designed this tag entirely. It is an original tag. I can't wait to try it out. I had recently gotten a comment on one of my videos asking me to do an annotation video, and then this came out, so it kind of just seemed like the perfect way to answer some questions in a more organized manner. I wasn't really sure where to go with that video just because I have a couple of different ways of annotating. It's something that I just started to do probably last year before I started BookTube, but in terms of my reading, it's definitely been more of a recent development. In terms of the history behind annotating, I think that the questions get into that a little bit, so I'm not going to talk about my past with it, but let's just say that this was an extreme change for me. I previously was the person that thought that nobody, if the tripod shakes, it's because of Ember. Again, I'm sorry. I previously was the person that didn't think that people should do anything to harm their books, no writing in it or anything along those lines, which kind of doesn't make sense because I was also a really big dog earer, but writing in books for some reason was crossing the line for me. I don't really know. I was also a spine breaker. Maybe I wasn't quite as strict with my books as I thought that I was, but regardless, writing in it was super taboo for me. So I'm just going to jump right into it, and the first question that Jessie has is, do you mark your annotations with page flags? Yes. I am a huge tabber. I am a big sticky tabber. This is what I started doing when I started watching all of the BookTube videos on bookish annotation. And I started doing the system that everybody kind of used. I was using Brittany the Bibliophile's kind of method, which she had gotten from Books with Chloe, and I had seen a little bit from Little Book Owl. So I guess this is my little annotation pouch. I got it off of Redbubble. It just carries all of my sticky tabs in it, and I just have the ones that you get off of Amazon. They're relatively cheap. You can get a massive pack of them for like maybe $6, I want to say, on Amazon. So these are the tabs that I started with, and they're great. I love that they have the little arrows. I love that they're see-through, and I love that there are 7 different colors to choose from. But I will say that recently I have gotten away from the previous method that I used to annotate and got more into the system that Becca in the Books uses, which involves a little bit more color coordination and planning ahead. So I ended up buying more sticky tabs with more colors. These are pretty much the same situation. They don't have the arrows, but there are more colors for me to choose from. And on top of that, my friend Z over at You Can't Catch Z, she's one of my besties, you should definitely go check out her channel, for my birthday sent me an entirely new pack of sticky tabs, which I haven't gotten a chance to break into yet, but I really appreciate her for that. She saw them on my Amazon wish list and she spoiled me greatly. So I use a whole bunch of different sticky tabs, but regardless, all of them are found on Amazon. They are relatively inexpensive if you are looking for tabs to use, but those are the ones that I use. Question number 2 is, do you match your flags to the book cover, or do you have a set flagging system? So I had started to talk about flagging systems earlier on. I'm just going to get a little bit more in depth on that now. Like I said, have recently started changing my annotation system a little bit, but for the most part, previously, what I used to do was set up a flagging system using all of these colors. So for example, lighter purple would be like foreshadowing, dark purple would be for super sad moments, blue would be for something that was really shocking, green for something I found funny, yellow for something that I found really annoying, orange for like world building or character development, and then pink was for a scene that I loved or like an interaction between characters that I loved. Like I said, this is very, very similar to the systems that Books with Chloe, Brittany the Bibliophile, and I believe Kaz from Little Book Owl all used, which is where I first found out that this was a thing that you could do, was by, I believe, watching Brittany's video on it. And it was cool. I had no problem with that. I really enjoyed it, but I wasn't finding myself getting any use out of it. You know, like, it's cool, I guess, to look back and see, oh, these are the emotions that I was feeling. Like, What have I tabbed? So that's the annotation system that I used for Malice, and you can kind of see all of the colors here, and it's kind of cool to look back and see, oh, this is what, like, how I felt throughout the course of reading this book. But ultimately, I don't get very much out of it in the long run. It's cool to look back on, and that's it. Which is why I had started to change my system, and I haven't really quite implemented it yet. I started to with the blade itself, but ended up ultimately stopping reading it physically. I think I switched over to reading it audibly and a little bit on my ebook, just because it was not, I was in a reading slump and it wasn't clicking for me at all. But I did switch over to Becca and the Books' version of annotating, which involves more of annotating for understanding, like in a fantasy novel. What she does, and I'll link her video down below because she explains it much, much better than I do, but essentially she uses about 5 different colors, give or take. She uses colors for everything involving the world building, so geographical, language, like types of people that exist, anything that involves like the actual building up of the world gets its own color. Anything involving like politics or political machinations gets its own color. Alliances, things like that, they get their own color. Things involving the history of the world, like people talking about lores or legends or just giving a kind of historical context for the situation that they're currently in, gets its own color. Magic gets its own color, so anything involving like something that magic can do or something new that pops up that a character learns how to do involving magic gets its own color. And then finally, plot gets its own color, so anything that's like notable moments, anything that might be foreshadowing, important plot points, or random items that pop up that she finds suspicious that might come into play later, she tabs that as part of the plot. I thought that this was a lot better for me as a reader because I could get something out of it. I would be able to, in terms of looking back on the book, be able to look at that color coding system and pinpoint, okay, this is where we learned about this. For as much epic fantasy as I read, it just seems like a much better plan. It's really cool to look back on how I was feeling in terms of the emotions like while I was reading the book, but with all of the epic fantasies that I read in terms of comprehension, this definitely seemed like it was more up my alley. So I definitely wanted to try that out, and I did start to, like I said, with the blade itself. Me stopping it with the blade itself has nothing to do with the tabbing system itself so much as the reading slump kind of thing that I was in at the time. But that was a very long-winded way of saying that I do have a system. I am now switching it to color coding, but in colors that fit also with the color, so it is a little bit more aesthetically pleasing as well. Question number 3 is, what is the first book that you ever annotated? This is actually really easy for me to remember because I really shouldn't have done it on a book that I was reading for the first time with no idea of what I was doing, but it was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This is the first book in the Last Magician series, and it follows a couple of characters. There's time travel. It involves like magic in New York. I believe the second book is called The Devil's Thief, which I have and I also want to get to, but I haven't yet. But regardless of all of that, I decided to tab this for the first time. As you can see, I didn't do a great job with the tabs. They stick out super, super far on the side, which I don't love. And it looks like I stopped halfway through. And I think, again, that's just because this tabbing system wasn't working for me. It was a book that I didn't know what I was doing with tabbing yet, and therefore, like, I didn't really know what to do, and so halfway through I just got fed up with it. It also looks like I wrote myself a little character card here. Interesting. I don't know why I did that. I don't think I gave myself a key. Oh, I did give myself a key, which is good because sometimes my colors change. But yeah, it was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell, and clearly I stopped halfway through. The second book that I think that I did was A Torch Against the Night. That's the second book in The Ember and the Ashes, right? I think. Anyway, it was whatever the second book was, which is, I'm pretty sure, A Torch Against the Night. I tabbed that as well, and once again, it was probably a book that I really didn't need to because I didn't know what I was doing and I was just feeling it out. I think that in terms of coming up with an annotation system, you are better off doing it on a reread because it's easier for you to figure out like what is coming and what you might want to tab for future reads. Question number 4, like I've already talked about a little bit, is have you ever been against annotating books? Yeah, 100%. I was definitely not a big book writer. If I came across a book that somebody else had written in, I was fine with that. I thought it was interesting to see their thoughts, which is probably why I'm okay with it now, because that was not a big segue for me. But yeah, there was definitely a time, and I have definitely yelled at John for even trying to write in a cookbook. So yeah, there's definitely been a time where that was a big no-no for me. But again, I used to dog ear my books all the time. I used to break the spines. I have tons of books that have broken spines. I was not a pristine book person by any means, so I don't really know why writing was the limit for me, but I guess it was. Question number 5 is, did you ease into annotating your books, or did you just jump right in? So it looks like I eased in, because it looks like I started off with Kaz from the Little Book Owl's tip, which was, if you aren't ready to write in your books yet, put a note card every few pages throughout the book and you can write your thoughts on that instead. And I do have a note card about halfway through the book that I have written some thoughts on in here. I lost it again, but yeah, I have a note card in here like every 100 pages or so where I just wrote my thoughts down. I remember I did that for the Poppy War as well. I think I put a note card every 100 pages, and once I got to every like 50 page mark, I would just write down what I was thinking. Again, it didn't really work for me in the long run. I did end up writing directly on the pages. I want to say I started that with A Torch Against the Night, and I did that for a couple of other things. I think I did that for Kings of the Wild. Malice, I did note cards. I tend to switch it up depending on John a lot of the time, actually, because if it's a book that I think that he's going to want to read, I don't necessarily want to write my spoilery or non-spoilery thoughts on that page and influence how he's feeling while he's reading it. So if it's a book that he hasn't read yet, I do tend to write on a note card instead. Therefore, like before he reads it, I can always take them out. But yeah, that kind of now is my deciding factor for whether I'm going to write in the book or write on a note card. But it doesn't bother me to write in the books anymore, so yeah, I guess that wasn't really the question. I'm more using these questions as a guideline for making this annotation video versus actually, I don't know, just answering the questions. Clearly, I am a rambler. You guys knew this if you have been here for a while, so that's where we're at. Okay, question number 6. Do you keep an unannotated version of your annotated books? No. I only generally have one copy of most of my books. Absolutely zero shade if you do keep multiple copies. I just don't really have the room for it. Even for books that I absolutely love, I think that the only thing I have 2 of is like Sherlock Holmes, and I think that was a mistake, and the other edition is really just too pretty to get rid of at this point. But yeah, no, I only have 1 copy for the majority of my books, and that is the one that I usually have to write in, hence the only writing on note cards if John is going to read it, because I don't have a copy to give him that doesn't already have my thoughts in it. Question number 7 is, has anyone ever annotated a book for you? No, I don't. Nobody specifically ever has annotated a book like just for me. I did have a secondhand copy of Jurassic Park when I was in like junior high. It was the first copy of Jurassic Park I ever owned. I got it from like a library book sale, and throughout the entire book somebody had written in pen in the entire thing. That was really my first book that I had ever gotten that had somebody like writing in it, and where I was interested to see their thoughts. So that was a really treasured copy for me. Unfortunately, it did get lent to somebody 10 years ago now, maybe, and I don't think that I ever got it back, because we did get a second copy of Jurassic Park to replace it so that I have one in general. But yeah, no, Jurassic Park was the first book I've ever had that has been annotated by somebody else, but it wasn't specifically done for me. Question number 8 is, do you mind used books with annotations already in them? I already answered this. The answer is no. I don't. I don't know that I would go out of my way to buy a copy that has somebody else's annotations in them. Just because, like I talked about before, sometimes annotations can get a little bit spoilery, and if it's a book that I haven't read before, I don't necessarily know that that's something that I would want. I do buy a lot of used books, but generally they are not anything that anybody has written in. Question number 9 is, have you ever gotten hate or horrified stares for writing in your books? Not specifically, not in like a, oh god, you must keep your stuff pristine kind of a way. But I did try annotating a book at work once. Like, I was just reading on my lunch break. It was my time. I was doing my own thing, and I was reading it was A Torch Against the Night, actually. And so I was reading it, and I pulled out my sticky tab, and I went to make a notation on the page, and one of my coworkers and my boss were there, and they were just like giving me the weirdest looks, like, oh, what are you doing? So I think they asked me, like, what is that? And I was like, oh, I'm just, you know, writing my thoughts on this book. And they were like, oh, I thought people only did that for textbooks. Like, it was definitely a weird moment. They definitely didn't understand what I was doing, but it wasn't like them judging me for ruining a book so much as them judging me for, well, probably not reading in the way that they thought that I should read. But that's a whole other thing. Question number 10 is, what do you annotate your books with? So we've already gone over the sticky tabs that I use, and like I said, I'll try and link all of them down below. The pens that I use are the same pens that Books with Chloe uses. That is where I found out about them. I have been using them for at least the last year. Okay, they are the Staedtler triple liner pens. Honestly, guys, getting this to focus was way harder than I thought it should have been. Oh, I read that wrong. The Staedtler Tri Plus fine liner pens, which still work even if you leave the cap off. This pen in particular, I found it in our couch with the cap off. It had probably been there for weeks, and it still writes fine. It came in like 10 different colors. There's yellow, there's purple, there's green, there's pink, there's brown, there's gray. I'm not going to go into all of them. It's been great. They have so many different colors. They last forever. They were relatively cheap, so I definitely recommend them. They don't bleed really through the pages that I've noticed. I don't push too hard or anything, but yeah, they work great for me. Question number 11 is, have you ever regretted annotating a book? Like I said, I don't really love the job that I did on The Last Magician. I don't really love the job that I did on Amber in the Ashes. After that, I think I did a little bit better of, like, not just tabbing just to tab things, and instead tabbing, like, things that made me feel something or things that I thought about. And again, when I got to the blade itself, for the time that I did tab that book, I got a lot better about, like, finessing what I was tabbing so that I wasn't just, like, incessantly tabbing just to tab. We've said tab a lot during this entire video. So I don't regret annotating those two books. I just regret the manner in which I did, but you have to start somewhere. And honestly, I mean, it's really not a big deal. If you guys want to tab, whatever, just do it. It's not hurting anyone. It's not hurting your book, especially if you're just sticky tabbing and you're not writing in it yet. Just do it. Question number 12 is, why do you annotate? I went into this a little bit earlier. So like I said before, I was annotating because I thought that it was a cool thing to do while I was reading. I hoped that it would help with my, like, story retention when I went to talk about it to you guys later. And to an extent, I guess the old system did help me do that. I remembered a few points from the story a little bit better than I might have had I not tabbed them. However, I do think that the new tabbing system will help me much more in terms of reading comprehension, where I'm trying to understand the world and the magic system and all of that stuff and talk about it later on. I think that the new system will definitely work with that a lot better. Question number 13 is, when underlining, do you use a ruler? I don't, but I don't, like, freehand it either because your girl can't draw. So on these, well, here, it's a half gone one, but on these, like, sticky tabs, there's really nice straight edge on this. I often use that to underline. It's obviously not as big as a real page, but on the ones that Z got me, there is an actual ruler along the top edge, which is super nice. So when I get to using these, I will definitely be utilizing that for underlining. I don't necessarily always underline when I tab. Sometimes the tab is enough for me to just point out what I want. Other times, if there's something that I really want to stick, I underline, like, whatever that portion of the sentence is or the paragraph is, but I don't underline very often. And the very last question, number 14, is, do you annotate each book that you read? No, I don't. I don't really have a system for which books that I annotate. I'm a mood reader, and I guess I'm a mood annotator also, because I don't tab every fantasy book that I read. even though those are the ones that I would tab most often. I don't tab every book that I read by a long shot. So it's kind of when the mood strikes me, that's when I decide to annotate. I'm reading The Knight's Shadow right now, and I've mostly been reading that on ebook and audibly, so I can't annotate that. I think the last physical book that I picked up was Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey. I didn't tab that, but again, it is sci-fi. The last book that I had a feeling that I wanted to annotate would have been Project Hail Mary, but I read most of that in a car, and I didn't have my tabs with me, and then by the time I got back, I was pretty much done with it, and it was pointless to start. But like with a lot of the science in there, I did want to start tabbing that as well. But no, I don't annotate every single book that I read. I don't think that you have to. I think that you should annotate whatever you want in whatever way that you want, whatever works for you. I don't think that it is a pointless exercise. I know that some people do. I don't think that it is damaging the books. I think that annotating is great. If you have any questions to this rambly video, go ahead and ask me in the comments. Like I said, I just kind of started switching over my method in which I do this. If I change completely, again, I will make another video talking about it, I guess. But for now, that is the end of the annotation book tag by Jessie from Bowties and Books. I just wanted to thank them for coming up with this awesome original tag and making it a lot easier for me to make this video talking about it at all. And as usual, everything that I talked about, which wasn't really books this time, but I'll try and link all of the materials that I discussed in my description down below, as well as links to all of my social media where you can find me on Goodreads, Twitter, and Instagram. In addition to that, there's a couple of affiliate links down there for Book of the Month, and if you guys wanted to hit that like button if you liked this video, I would really appreciate it, as well as a subscription if you're not already. But that is it for me today, guys, so I will talk to you in my next one. Bye!